There's Point Loma. This is the view of all those sailors for all those years coming into Point Loma. Point Loma, you know, the sort of hill on the sea, you know, hill on the point, you know, Point Loma. Good wind today. Boat handles everything well. Gotta love this. Like I say, don't have my foresail up. Got the staysail. Really got a good wind. Probably make this into 2 videos, and so this is video 2 of our California history, Richard Henry Dana sailing trip. It's a field trip on a Dana 24, and the Dana 24 sailboat is this good, solid boat that honors the memory of Richard Henry Dana 2 years before the mast. This is Point Loma behind us, and we're coming into San Diego Bay. Nice little boat going by there. And so, you know, the issue is that we need to talk a little bit about what's wrong about the book. What we need to be careful about the book. Dana comes, remember, as a young man, and he comes as a sailor, and so although he teaches himself to speak Spanish, and so therefore is brought into certain situations where he is needed by the captain, he, for the most part, he's seeing only the shore life, the port life that a sailor would see, and he's not seeing the whole of California. So don't read him for California history. He's got a chapter in there which he gives the sort of big picture, and it's not very good. He is best at these eyewitness accounts of sailing and of people and of situations, but he's not so good at understanding the whole. So he presents the California as politically in turmoil, which it is in 1836, but that's only a very short period of time, and what he misses out on is he doesn't even mention Governor Figueroa, who died at the end of 1835, and that's a high point of Mexican period where the Spaniards and then later the Mexicans were doing very interesting things, and we do not want to look down on the Spanish and Mexicans in the way that Dana did. Dana, typical New Englander, Protestant, you know, he sees the celebration of holidays, the way the missions are sort of like low-level, lackadaisical. You know, they're actually they're being secularized at that time, you know, becoming just churches and things. And so he sees a very laid-back life. And he says, oh, if we New Englanders were here, we could, you know, make this into something. And that's too bad. Dana doesn't really understand or appreciate the Spanish and Mexican life. I think later in his life, when he travels the world, and he dies in Italy, and I think he later learns to appreciate that life a lot better. But when he's young, and he's writing that book, he's back in Boston writing that book in law school, he writes, you know, if we United States folks took it over, we'd make something more of California. So you got to watch out for that. He also does not fully understand the Indian situation, and so therefore he's not real good with Indians, and he says he doesn't. You know, he's very attuned to languages, and he does the Pidgin's beach language of the Hawaiians, and he teaches himself Spanish, but he actually denigrates the languages of the Indians at the different ports he runs across. He can't understand it. He denigrates it. So Dana's not good for overall California history. He's not good for Mexican, Spanish big picture stuff, nor Indian big picture stuff. What he is good for what he saw, what he experienced, what he felt on the California coast. This is what makes the book great, and what makes it a classic, and it is not really a classic of teaching California history. It's a classic of being in California at a very distinctive, special time in California's history. This maritime period where every anchorage was where people gathered and where the life of California was. Okay, that's why Point Loma is so interesting in the book. 6 months he spends here, lives on the beach over here, the La Playa, and they lobsters. They can go out at night with a torch and poke at the lobsters and catch them, and they gather together in meals where Scotsmen and Peruvians and Chileans and Italians and Hawaiians and Tahitians and all sorts of Pacific Islanders and Filipinos probably, although I don't think he mentions them, get together and share songs and share good times, and those are the most beautiful parts of the book. And he's a good soul. He's a good soul. He's a nice person and wants to be a loving person. And so he's struggling with becoming who he's going to be. So that's a fun part of the book. We should talk about him after, what he did later. How he got back and he got back and he was to Boston, and he needs to finish up his college, and they're going to make him take one more year of college, and so he graduates with the class of 1837. And in the class of 1837 is Henry David Thoreau. Okay, two people who are, it's American literature, American culture. We need to compare Dana and Thoreau. They graduate together. They're both in that world of Emerson at this moment. American scholar. And all that. And Dana really. Then the next year, 1838, he's going to write the 2 years before the Mass, this incredible classic, and so we need to see him in this Emersonian literati world where in many ways he's better than Thoreau at writing about nature, writing about politics, writing about society. At least I think so. Thoreau, his first book when he comes off of, out of college and stuff, takes him a while, but Dana's books become super famous, and so he writes A Week on the Concord Merrimack River. Now, if you look at the title, you can see where there's a reflection on 2 years before the Mass, and then it's an interesting book if you compare it with Dana's book, because Dana's book's much more pleasant, much more human, much more in tune really to geography and stuff, whereas Thoreau's book is not a successful book because it's an angry book. First of all, he rants against Christianity and stuff like that, and he also does a lot of religious stuff, talking about Muslims and Islam and Buddhism, and it's a very scattered book in many ways and not very successful, and you could see in it a Thoreau's sort of envy, I think, of Dana, and the felicity and beauty of Dana's book, and both of them are just love nature. They're such in people to just embrace the natural world, and they want to write about it. So Thoreau goes on, and Thoreau's a great writer, and I'm a big lover of Walden. But between the two of them, Walden is not a book that honors the dignity of labor or anything like that. Remember he says most men lead lives of quiet desperation, And Walden is a book where, in the context of this, he writes Civil Disobedience, which is a type of political book, political essay, which is really, it's very individualistic, almost unworkable, and in its sort of like wackiness, I think. Whereas Dana becomes a lawyer. Dana writes his book while he's a lawyer, and so there's a lot of very sophisticated political thought in Dana's book about power, about responsibility. And remember, Dana is going to become this lawyer, very abolitionist, he's going to do a lot of work for seamen's rights. He writes a book on maritime law later on. He writes a book on how to tie knots and things too, general seamanship. And then spends his life as a man dedicated to just social justice, especially in that pre-Civil War time. So the comparison of Thoreau and Dana, very interesting comparison, and I highly recommend that every American should read both of them. And the civil disobedience, the social justice, individualism, both of them reflect that Jacksonian world in different ways. And Dana's way, I think, is the way that gives the best and most wise picture of how to proceed, how America should proceed. Okay, we're coming into the port here. Remember, this is the port of San Diego in the Mexican and Spanish period. Right in here, in through here. And then Dana and his hide houses were back in front of those white tanks back there, white fuel tanks. Let's talk about how this all ends. Dana goes on to be this important lawyer, and like I say, he goes through depressions and stuff, and so he will go to sea on vacations. He'll go up to Maine and sail, and sailing always revives him, and he goes around the world, and he writes about going back to California with that, and he dies, like I say, in Italy on a travel trip. He has a wife, and he has a daughter. He has a son. The son marries the daughter of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Longfellow's a neighbor, and so it's like a over-the-fence romance. And today, the Dana and Longfellow, papers are together. One of the great things that Dana did, it's not a great thing maybe, but we should talk about, is that after the Civil War, Dana had been this abolitionist and had risen up as a prosecutor and done some real good abolitionist work for. He had freed, in the fugitive slave laws. He had worked against them in Boston before the war and had a good, strong reputation as an abolitionist, anti-slavery lawyer, and a good one, and a person who was high-minded and all that. So Dana gets asked at the end of the war by the Johnson administration, which was pro-South actually. Lincoln is dead, and asked by the Johnson administration to come help prosecute the president of the Confederacy because he's been arrested for treason. And so in the arrest for treason, so after the Civil War, Dana's a prosecutor and from Massachusetts, and had been brought down by the Johnson administration. Lincoln is dead, to deal with a very touchy subject, which is the prosecution of Jefferson Davis, president of the Confederacy, for treason. He's obviously a traitor. He's obviously going to get convicted. So the prosecutor, the attorney general, and all the prosecutors, they don't really want to do this because, to kill Jefferson Davis, to hang him for treason, gosh, that would be that. Lincoln had ended the war with malice toward none and charity for all, and it would have really ripped the heart out of the South. And so there was a sort of like moment in the country where, okay, by law, we really need to execute, try him for treason and execute him. And, on the other hand, is we do not want to do that. So how do we get out of it? And, well, we can, try him and pardon him and all that sort of stuff. And so sort of in a typical political move, they passed the whole sort of responsibility onto this Massachusetts lawyer, Dana, who has a great reputation as a, pro-Northern, anti-slavery lawyer. And he has a reputation also of being fair. People have, everybody's read his book, and they've always enjoyed him as a kid, and he's got this great reputation. So they bring Dana in. Dana sees the situation and does what a sort of a sailor move. Okay, I see this as a sailor move. He knows that he needs to do something subtle, something with the wind, something that, know when to luff, know when to, tack, know when to go with the current. And so he does not want to sort of like do some sort of crazy thing, jump off a cliff or anything. He wants to sail. He wants to do some. Sailors learn how to work with nature and not, do crazy stuff. Extreme stuff. That's another difference with Thoreau. And so Thoreau is not a sailor. And so Dana decides to recommend that Jefferson Davis not be tried. Just as a prosecutor, you can just decide not to try something. Well, this took the heat off of everyone, and it was probably the best decision in the long run for the malice toward none, charity for all future of the, republic. And so Jefferson Davis is not tried for treason, and Dana goes home. So this is pretty much never mentioned in American history textbooks, and it's certainly not a heroic move or anything like that. But it's a judicial wisdom. It's Dana. It's Dana at Dana's best, I think, when he wants to not see the world in black and white, not be vindictive, to try and work a rough situation and turn it into something a little more calm. By the way, have you noticed how calm it is in here? Once you're inside of the point, that ocean's raging on the other side of that hill there. You and I were out in it just now, but here, weather's calm, the winds have come down, the water is flat, so it makes San Diego Bay so great. Okay. There's Scripps Institute of Oceanography. That's that area that Dana lived. And that's Shelter Island stretching out there. San Diego off in the distance over there. Sort of an older ship. I don't know what they're doing there with that guy. And there's out to the point. 2 years before the mast. Love it. Back home with Dana. Yep. Good trip. Yeah. And our little Dana 24. They're looking nice. Back home. Yeah.